In a bold and unexpected move, Captain Ibrahim Traoré gave Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just 72 hours to apologize to Africa. Why? What happened at the United Nations that shook African leaders to their core? This will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It all began in United Nations gathering, at one of the most important meetings in the world, the United Nations General Assembly. This is where leaders from almost every country come together to talk about global issues, peace, war, poverty, climate, and development. Every country gets a chance to speak. Every voice is supposed to be equal. This time, the spotlight was on Africa. Many African presidents and ambassadors had arrived early. They were ready. Ready to speak about the problems their countries were facing and the help they needed. They came to talk about Africa's future with respect and seriousness. But as the speeches began, something strange, and honestly, disrespectful, started happening. As soon as some African leaders got up to speak, a group of delegates led by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared uninterested. Some were seen whispering. Others were laughing quietly. Netanyahu himself was spotted scrolling through documents, chatting with aides, and at one point, even walking out during one of the speeches. People noticed. African delegates noticed. You could see it in their faces. Disbelief. Confusion. Anger. One camera caught the exact moment a young African diplomat from Senegal looked around the room. His eyes followed Netanyahu. His expression said it all. Is this how little they think of us? But this wasn't just about one man's behavior. This moment brought back many painful memories, times when African leaders were ignored, laughed at, or treated as less important on the world stage. It reminded many Africans watching from home of the deeper problem. Even today, African voices are often silenced or disrespected in big global meetings. Soon, videos of the incident started going viral. People were sharing clips from the UN live stream, saying things like, "Why is Netanyahu laughing while our president is talking? This is the problem with how Africa is treated globally. If this was a European or American leader, would he still behave like this?" African media outlets began reporting on it too. It wasn't just about Netanyahu ignoring a speech. It was about the message it sent. A message that said, your issues are not important. But the African leaders didn't stop. They continued their speeches with pride. They spoke about the damage done by colonization. They spoke about the need for fair trade, for proper investment, for respect. One speaker from Burkina Faso said, "We are no longer beggars. We are builders." And that's what made the moment even more painful for many Africans watching. Here were leaders trying to move the continent forward, and they were being ignored. It wasn't just Netanyahu. But because he is a powerful figure, and because cameras caught him clearly, he became the face of that disrespect. Some people tried to defend him. They said maybe he was tired. Maybe he didn't mean it. But for many Africans, that wasn't good enough. The damage was done. On African radio stations and social media spaces, people asked, would he have done this if a European leader was speaking? Do they think Africa is still under their control? When will they learn to listen? And then, the question came, who will respond? Who will speak for Africa? Who will call this out without fear? That's when all eyes turned to one man, a young military leader from West Africa, someone who has been gaining attention for saying exactly what many Africans feel, but are too scared to say. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. At that point, nobody expected what would happen next. Nobody expected that he would take the lead and give Netanyahu just 72 hours to fix what he had done. This wasn't just politics. This was personal. It was about African pride. And it was about time someone stood up. As the video of Netanyahu's behavior at the United Nations spread across Africa like wildfire, there was one question on everyone's mind: will any African leader respond? Most leaders said nothing. Some were silent because of diplomacy. Others didn't want to cause more tension. But the people were angry. They wanted a strong voice. Someone who would not only speak, but speak without fear. And that's when the world heard from Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso. Just 36 years old, but already known for his fearless speeches, military background, and deep love for Africa. Traoré had just returned from a major meeting with other Sahel leaders. He was briefed about what had happened at the UN. His advisors told him about the video, about Netanyahu's body language, about the online outrage. At first, Traoré said nothing. But the next morning, something unusual happened. His press team quickly called for a national address. The message was simple: the president will speak to the nation, and to Africa. When Traoré finally appeared, he was calm. No shouting. No drama. Just direct, clear words. He looked straight at the camera. His eyes did not blink. We saw what happened at the United Nations. We saw how African leaders were ignored. How some were disrespected. We are not blind. And we are not fools. If Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu believes he can treat African voices as noise, if he believes our leaders can be laughed at while speaking for our people, then he must correct himself. He must apologize, not just to a few leaders, but to the entire continent. Then came the line that shocked the world. The line that made every African youth sit up. The line that showed this was not just another boring political speech. We give him 72 hours. 72 hours to apologize. Not in secret. Not behind closed doors. But openly. The same way he disrespected us. If not, Burkina Faso, and any African nation that values dignity, will respond appropriately. The room went quiet. Even his aides looked stunned. But Traoré didn't stop. Africa is not your playground. We are not a continent of beggars. We are builders, protectors, and proud people. The days of silence are over. Within minutes, the video clip went viral across the continent. On TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, people were reposting, praising, and reacting. Hashtags like #Traoré speaks, #Respect Africa, and #72 hours were trending in Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Mali, and beyond. One user wrote, "Traoré just said what every African leader has been too afraid to say." Another said, "Finally, someone who sees our pain and doesn't hide behind politics." But this wasn't just about feelings. It was about power. Real power. Because for the first time in a long time, a sitting African president had publicly challenged a powerful Western ally, and he wasn't asking for money. He was asking for respect. Behind the scenes, diplomatic pressure began to rise. Israeli diplomats reportedly tried to contact Burkina Faso's foreign ministry. They wanted to clarify the situation, saying Netanyahu meant no disrespect. But Traoré refused to accept private excuses. He wanted an open apology. A public correction. Nothing less. Meanwhile, young Africans across the continent started marching. Not with violence, but with pride. Students wore shirts saying 72 hours, and artists began painting murals of Traoré with bold quotes like, "Africa will not kneel." Even African musicians began dropping verses in songs, referencing the moment. One rapper from Dakar said, "No more bows, no more chains, we speak now in Traoré's name." Other African leaders stayed mostly quiet, but behind closed doors, some were impressed. A few began reviewing their own diplomatic ties. One West African official quietly told a news outlet, "What he said, we have all felt it." And while the international press tried to downplay the issue, African media held it high. This was not just about one speech. It was about changing the narrative. About no longer begging to be heard, but demanding to be respected. Whether Netanyahu would respond or not didn't matter in that moment. What mattered was that someone had finally said it. Loud. Clear. And without apology. That someone was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and just like that, the clock started ticking. From the moment Ibrahim Traoré made his bold statement, Africa and the world began watching the clock. 72 hours. That was the deadline. 3 days for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do one thing: apologize publicly to Africa. It wasn't just about words anymore. This had become a test of dignity. A test of leadership. A test of respect. Across African cities and villages, people were following every update. In cafes, on university campuses, in taxis and market stalls, the question on everyone's lips was: will he apologize? Will he ignore the warning? What happens if he doesn't? The countdown became more than just numbers. It became a symbol. A sign that Africa was no longer going to stay silent when disrespected. In Burkina Faso, young people gathered in city squares holding signs that said, "We stand with Traoré." Some painted murals of a giant clock, with Africa's flag inside it. In Nigeria, popular radio stations ran hourly updates. In Kenya, hashtags like #72-hour countdown and #Africa stands up went viral. Meanwhile, in Israel, Netanyahu's team stayed quiet. No apology. No press release. Just silence. Some international analysts said Traoré had gone too far. That he should have handled things behind closed doors. But for millions of Africans watching, that was exactly the problem. For too long, Africa had been told to stay silent. To accept disrespect with a smile. To handle insults quietly. This time was different. This time, Africa had set the rules. By the second day, African artists, musicians, and influencers joined the movement. One famous singer from South Africa released a short song called 72 Hours, with lyrics like, "Respect is not a favor, it's a right. And Africa won't sleep tonight." Posters went up in Ouagadougou. Billboards were changed in Bamako and Lome. Even in Paris, African youth in the diaspora began holding small rallies, holding up signs that read, "Netanyahu must apologize." Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré's team released another short message. It was only 2 sentences long. The deadline remains. Africa is watching. That message alone was reposted over 2 million times in 24 hours. In the streets, people started doing something powerful. They started dreaming. Not just about this one issue, but about the future. They were asking, what if we had more leaders like this? What if Africa finally stood united? What if we could speak with one voice, without fear? It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was personal. Emotional. It was about identity. About pride. But not everyone was happy. Some foreign governments started calling Traoré a troublemaker. Others accused him of trying to divide global diplomacy. One European diplomat even said, this kind of talk could isolate Burkina Faso. But Traoré's supporters didn't care. As one woman in Dakar put it, if being isolated means we're respected, then let us be isolated. Day 3 arrived. The final 24 hours. Still, no word from Netanyahu. Still no apology. Still no explanation. International news stations began running headlines. Will Israel respond to Africa? Burkina Faso stands its ground. The clock is ticking. In those final hours, something beautiful happened. Messages of unity poured in from every corner of the continent. From elders in Ethiopia, to students in Congo, to traders in Togo, they were all saying the same thing. We are with Traoré. We are tired of being looked down on. Then, the 72 hours ended. Netanyahu did not apologize. Not publicly. Not privately. He stayed silent. And that silence spoke volumes. Traoré didn't hold another press conference. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. Instead, his office quietly released a message that said, "We take note. The continent has taken note. Africa is awake now." The meaning was clear: Africa would not forget. And moving forward, things would not be the same. Other African nations started to take steps. Some paused talks with Israeli companies. Some postponed visits. But most importantly, African citizens began holding their own leaders accountable too. People began asking, will our president defend us like Traoré did? Will our government stay silent when we are insulted? This moment had created a new kind of fire in the hearts of many Africans. A fire of pride. A fire of unity. Maybe Netanyahu never apologized. Maybe he thought Africa would forget. But he was wrong. Because in those 72 hours, Africa found its voice again. And that voice is growing louder every day. And at the center of it stood one man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, not just as the president of a small West African nation, but as a symbol of bold leadership in a continent ready to rise. What happens next? That part is still being written. But one thing is clear, Africa is no longer watching in silence. Africa is speaking, and the world is finally listening.